just started studying the book of Galatians in our community study, and I want to share a part of that with you this morning. You know, usually when Paul begins these letters, he starts off with a section, we'll call it a Thanksgiving section, where he gives thanks to God for the brethren, like he did the church at Philippi, when he says, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine. But when we get to this letter, we see something very different. In verse 6, he says, I marvel that you're turning away so soon from him who called you into the grace of Christ, to a different gospel, which is not another gospel. But there are some who trouble you, want to pervert the gospel of Christ. And so that may seem abrupt and really harsh. And believe me, as preachers, we want to be as positive and as encouraging as we can. But Paul's not going to pretend like things are going better here than what they actually are. And so Paul is just so disappointed. He's marveling that they've turned away so soon. They've abandoned Christ. And what did they get in return? They got a perverted gospel. A different gospel, which is not another gospel, but it's a perverted gospel. They've lost so much to gain so little so quickly. And so we can see that there's no such thing as a substitute or replacement gospel. And apparently there had been some false teachers who'd gone around and taught something contrary to what Paul had taught them in the beginning. And as Paul emphasizes in this chapter, in verse 1, he says that his apostleship is not from man, but it's from God. It's from Jesus himself. And he goes on to emphasize that the message that he preached to them, that wasn't from man either. He got it directly from God. But these false teachers, they didn't get it from God. Paul was an inspired writer of the New Testament. The things that we read in here, they are directly breathed out from God. So they're the message we need to be following. And so as he'll emphasize that we've got to have loyalty to this over man. In verse 8, he says, but even if we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel to you than what we have preached to you, let him be accursed. And he essentially goes on to say the same thing for emphasis in verse 9. And so it doesn't matter who is doing the teaching. If it's not the gospel, then we shouldn't be following it. Even if it's an angel from heaven. I don't care who it is. Don't listen. And so Paul's not saying you need to follow me blindly. You need to follow me blindly because I know everything. In fact, he says, even if we or an angel preach something contrary. And so Paul is saying we've got to have 100% loyalty to the gospel. Too many people have so much respect for the preacher that they fail to measure what he preaches with what we can easily read in our Bibles. And so what do we learn? Everything that we hear has to be measured up to the standard. The gospel is the standard. What we read in our Bible is the standard. And so it doesn't matter who's doing the speaking. It doesn't matter if they claim they got their message from an angel in heaven. If it doesn't measure up to what we can easily read in our Bibles, if it doesn't measure up to the standard, then we shouldn't be following it.